Welcome to This Team is Killing Us, a podcast about what the Carolina Panthers do to good people. She is Lauren Brownlow. I am Dimitri Ravanos. And Lauren, what is killing me today is that we did not get to see more of what we saw Saturday throughout the preseason.
I hear you. I don't disagree in theory. However, there was this legit part of me, and they even kind of expressed it on the broadcast some, where like, it's almost like, oh God, don't ruin it. Like, no, don't. Because I think Dave Canales had told them before the game that if there was a 3-and-out right after the series, that he was considering putting them back in again, the first string, which would have made sense for sure.
Sure.
Right? Like they're already there, already warmed up, all that stuff. But I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Don't. No, it's perfect. I want to remember them this way.
All right, so I agree with everything you're saying and also understand what the strategy is behind limiting their actual game action in the preseason and saving that for like the live scrimmage stuff they did with the Jets last week. Totally understand that. That being said, I still stand by my belief that you are talking about a quarterback who was bruised both physically and emotionally last year and a brand new coaching staff. I would have liked to have seen them have a few more live game snaps before we head into the regular season. But Lauren, what we got on Saturday, the offense looked good. Bryce looked really good. And I'm going to let you, even though he is, I'll tell you what, you put on your jersey. I will.
Right.
Yep. I'll put my sweet tiny Prince hat back on just to celebrate. Man, he looked really good. It is amazing what somebody with talent can accomplish when they have a coaching staff working to better their talent.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like we saw things, and Steve Smith said it on the broadcast too. And look, Smitty, yes, he works like for the team, I guess technically, but like he's not one to just like give out praise. I mean, he roasted Jack Plummer a few weeks ago. He was very nice to Jack. And by the way, Jack, great job. You know,
he look, not like there was a lot of competition, but I feel better with him being the number 3 because for the first time he looked like he had seen a football before.
Yeah, it was nice to see that. I was like, oh, okay. So that, because at first I'm like someone even tweeted at me. They're like, wow, like, you know, Jeff Brown really must be a wizard, you know, when you watch him play now. And I'm like, well, to be somewhat fair to Jack, like, the quality of dudes relative to his competition has significantly nosedived.
Yeah. I would also argue like Purdue Jeff Brum was a wizard, right? Like last year, Jack Plummer did not look great, which kind of...
He had the WTF moments.
Sure.
Which is like, that's been my biggest issue with him is like, hey, when someone's sacking you, maybe don't just throw the ball wildly in the air. Right. I don't know. Just spitball in here. Just saying. Probably not a good idea. But like this, you know, he was just like missing open guys in previous preseason games. And you're like, ugh. But this game he was hitting, like he looked like a different guy. And Bryce Young, I mean, yeah, it's like you said, like you were seeing plays called in a way, like this is going to sound so stupid, but this is where we are to put the offense at an advantage against the defense. Like it was like schemes were being run, like you could see what the play was meant to do.
I will tell you, one of the plays that really stood out to me as, oh, Dave Canales gets what this is, was actually what was counted as a sack. The scramble that sort of broke down to the line of scrimmage. I loved that sort of, let's call it a diamond shotgun formation where you put 2 running backs up in front of him in the center and the quarterback and those guys make a diamond form, because that alone is what allowed Bryce time to scramble and improvise and get back to the line of scrimmage. Like there were definitely times last year where Bryce looked like a rookie overwhelmed by not having the best weapons anymore. I'm not going to pretend that this was all on everybody else. There were definitely times where Bryce, I think, did not. It looked like the life of privilege he had led as a quarterback did not prepare him to be the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. And I know there are a lot of people that are going to dismiss this as the Panthers 1s versus the Bills 2s. But to me, it was more about seeing the scheme in action. It was more about seeing what had been worked on in a game scenario, regardless of who it was against.
Well, and also, I mean, and I wrote this as well for OG fans, the newsletter this week. Subscribe if you want to read my, not rantings, but
musings.
Musings. No, I like that. That's better. I did text Ovius earlier that I could give him 1,000 words on Dave Canales looking like a snack if he wanted. But
you know what? Let's see how people respond to 500 first.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, no, I mean, it's like it was just one of those things where, sorry, I literally just thought of Dave Canales in that outfit and forgot what we were just. No, I mean, you could see that he was like confident.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big change, Bryce, like you could see that he was making decisions quicker, and you could see something you didn't often see last year, which was like literally his eyes going from person to person, making reads. You know what I mean? Like, like going through his progressions. You know what I mean? We didn't see that as much, partially because he didn't have any time to do that.
And partially because he didn't have anybody he could throw to.
Correct. Right. He didn't have anybody he trusted. He didn't have a lot of options in that department, but he just he looked the part of an NFL quarterback in a way that I don't think we had seen to date. And okay, this is what I wrote. I remember now. I remember what I was going to say. I wrote that look, I get it's the twos, but the Panthers played a lot of teams last year, and some were basically trash cans.
Sure.
On ablaze in the secondary, and could still I remember we were going into some games. I forget which one, but there was one in particular that we were like, oh, well, you were like, oh, they should be able to pass on them. I'm like, don't say that.
It was either the Colts or the Titans, or I'm sorry, it was either the Colts or the Jaguars. It was one of the AFC South teams that I remember making the argument that despite what they have done record-wise, that secondary is pretty bad. Yeah, it was the Colts because the Colts feasted on Bryce in that game.
And so that's what I'm saying. It's, I hear that argument, but at the same time, last year they played crappy teams too. Even later in the year, they're playing teams with some banged up secondaries. Sure. It still didn't matter. They still looked completely inept as a passing offense. And so for me, it was like you said, it's more about looking the part, whether it's from Bryce on down, from the play calling to just the execution. No penalties. I forgot to even put that in my column.
Right.
That was hello, hi, not just not everything went according to plan either, though. And I think that was also good. Like you said, the scramble to get back to the line of scrimmage. I loved that play from Bryce. It took him a little long maybe to make the decision, but not too long. So, he still made it.
That was the one thing that I think, and I don't know that this had to do with last year. I told you before he even played an NFL game, sometimes he takes too long to make a decision because he thinks he's always going to be able to make that throw.
Something happen.
Yeah, I definitely saw that. I still want to see that ball get out a little bit quicker, but you're right. You could just physically see, and some of it is because of the way his head is moving. He is evaluating what the situation is as he goes through his progressions. I mean, I think really the last step for him is just to get the bravery up to understand when you got to tuck and go, or maybe not get the bravery up, but just accept sometimes that, you can't work wizardry against even, the Bears the way you could against Auburn or Texas. It's just a completely different level of competition. But look, I was really happy to see him in some cases, and particularly this stood out on the touchdown pass to Jordan Matthews. Sometimes the dude just took what the defense gave it, right?
Yes.
And they gave him Jordan Matthews wide open in the middle of that field, and he didn't think twice about where that ball was going.
No hesitation, straight bullet. And it was just he was quicker, much quicker to make decisions, I think, than we've seen him, much more sure of himself. And so for me, I get, the competition, but we also saw him in the preseason some more last year than I feel like we did this year, obviously. And it's not like we saw a lot last year in the preseason that we were great. We were oh shit, this isn't good.
Yeah, no, that's 100% accurate. One thing that I noticed with the starters in, and this is both compared to last year and the first two preseason games where you're not using a lot of starters, the play calls were a little more daring, which is good to see, that Dave Canales clearly has been working on something. This team has been putting together. Look, we talked about this last week, right? The Jets came out of that joint scrimmage raving about what they saw from Bryce. The reports from the media were in the live scrimmage session, the Panthers caused 5 takeaways in that competition against the Jets. Like, there is reason for optimism. Granted, you got to temper it, right? Like, I think we're still probably looking, like, I think the goal is by the end of the season, we are in position for a top 10 draft pick, not a top 5 draft pick. I think that's a realistic goal for this team.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, like, for optimism, it's not like make a playoff run. That's not even what optimism looks like for this team. Literally what it is can you have a team that more often than not looks like a competent football team that knows what it is doing on a play-to-play basis, right? Like, literally, my bar is low, okay? It's very low. Like,
but you know what, Lauren? The bar is low in the NFC South, that if you look like a competent football team, that could be the difference between, a 3-win season and a 6-win season.
100%. But it's just like, look, I mean, for me, it's like, I'm not going into the season, like, even thinking about wins and losses as much. I want to see, like, for instance, I mean, look, they lost a lot on the defensive side. We don't know what that's going to look like in game action. I think there's even more uncertainty to be had there. There's been some nice performances by some guys down the depth chart and stuff. And, it's nice to see Shaq Thompson getting closer to healthy and everything else. But, like, I don't know what that's going to look like with everything that they lost. It could get real ugly against certain teams, but, like, even Cam Newton's, like, rookie year, for instance, the defense sucked like real bad. Yeah. And so, like, I don't care as much about that. They lost games almost exclusively because of that at times, but I want to see the quarterback play look better and the offense look better. And, I mean, again, it's literally one drive, but, like, when I tell you those were by far my happiest moments as a Panthers fan in the last, I don't know. I mean, I can't even think back to the last time I was that, like, satisfied watching even a Panthers possession, even one single possession, because usually some fuckery would happen in the middle of that. I'm like, why? Yeah. And there really wasn't anything that I hated that happened. I actually, okay, I will say, like, the third down play call, like, short of the sticks, I was like, gross. But then when Steve Smith was like, oh, well, they've got analytics guy up in the booth, and I'm sure, I forget what his name was, but I was like, hey,
we played that clip from him on Ross Tucker's podcast before, but I can't remember his name either.
It was something kind of generic-y, but it was like, he is going to let them know you got 2 downs to work with here. And you also, I think, saw again, maybe this is just me being biased. Maybe this is hot person bias, but you also saw Dave Canales looking confident as well. Like, you didn't see him. He clearly seemed to be in his bag a little bit.
I think that he did not. There are a lot of things that make me think that Dave Canales. No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase this. There's a lot that Dave Canales does that just reinforces the idea that Frank Reich did not want the situation he stepped into last year, and as a result was not giving his best effort. Like, I know that is, like, an unfair thing to say, seemingly, because there are only 32 of these jobs. It's hard to imagine anybody not trying, but it doesn't seem hard when you see them in that drive to figure out, like, there is just a different attitude in the way plays are being called, right? Like, we'll get
it was clear, like, there was never a question from anybody on that roster. Like, it wasn't like they were, like, looking like, oh, are we going? Like, everybody seemed to already know exactly, like, oh, this is we got 2 downs to get 6-yard situation.
I watched the replay on NFL Plus, and that was, they just always post the home team's replay on that. So I was watching it with the Bills crew, and they pointed out that, like, last year, that when the Panthers decided to go for it on 4th down, there was some surprise because they were looking at last year's stats and saying that even as far as to the 35-yard line, last year on 4th down, the Panthers at times were punting, like, and that seemed like a part of the field.
Oh, I know.
Climb to punt.
I remember, because you remember that almost drove me crazier than anything else, especially as the losses piled up, because I'm like, who the fuck? Just do it. Who cares? What are you going to do? Lose again? Like, who corners.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit, and I'll combine these two things. What we think might happen as we head towards cut down day. I think Jordan Matthews has played his way onto this team.
Yeah.
Um,
Liked
I
him.
I think that one of the interesting things here is if you're not going to have Jonathan Brooks to start the season, like Mike Boone has probably played his way onto this team, at least to start the year.
I guess. I mean, he's been fine.
Yeah, I mean, he has been the guy that consistently is getting the opportunities, which makes me think there's at least enough trust to keep him. Now, when Brooks comes back, unless Boone has somehow left over Raheem Blackshear, he's not going to stay on this team. But I do think he'll open the season on this roster.
Yeah, probably so. And I love the way Chuba looked as well. Like he looked terrific. Just he always gets you at least 2 more yards than he was supposed to. Right. I love that about him. I love it. And I mean, every Icky. Did you see Icky?
I did see Icky.
I was so happy. I was like, look at you laying a pass block.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Like a good one that they needed, like that Bryce needed to keep that play going. So I was so thrilled to see that.
I still think they should draft his replacement. But yes, it was.
I hear you. Well, this is make or break. Performance. This year is make or break for him. I mean, no question to me. I mean, you can have a down year, you know, a sophomore slump or whatever you want to call it. But at this point, you're in your 3rd year in the league. Like you're at a very important position. You got to, you know, it's got to be now or never.
Yeah. Joe Person projected the 53-man roster after cuts on The Athletic. And one thing that jumped out to me, just because it is a real statement on where this roster was last year versus now, when he got to the secondary, he said that DiCaprio Bootle is kind of a no-brainer cut. And last year, there were times where that might have been the best quarterback on this team.
I mean, he was literally starting by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, great name. So no offense.
Of course.
And he, you know, he wasn't like awful. They were probably worse, but it was also like, oh no, it's a bad sign when that's what we're starting.
I think it is fair to say last year, the majority, not at his best, because he actually did towards the end of the season have some great like moments where he's breaking up passes and you're wondering like, well, why can't you do that all the time?
Well, they're throwing at him for a reason too. I always have to remind myself of that.
And see, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think overall that dude probably is an NFL practice squad level talent. And that's not an insult. Like, you think of all the people that play football in their lives that would kill to have that level of talent. I just don't want to see him dressing in a Panthers uniform. Yeah. The position group that I think is most interesting is tight end, just because are all kinds of different ways teams approach that. I told you, I think Jordan Matthews played the way under the roster. You clearly are not going to get rid of Jatavian Sanders. You're not going to get rid of Trimble. Yeah, thank you. So are those your 3?
So that means Ian Thomas goes bye-bye?
That's what I was about to say. So do you carry 4 to take Ian Thomas?
I mean, to be fair, like the one thing I don't know, because I don't pay close enough attention unless someone screws up to this part of the team, is like special teams, because he could be a guy that plays on all. I feel like I've seen him on at least one of the special teams before. So if he's a guy that plays on a lot of the special teams and they feel like that's tougher to, I think Trimble does too, though. I could be wrong.
It doesn't. Now I'm trying to remember how he is classified, but isn't Smith Marset? No,
he does a lot on there.
He's classified as a wide receiver. I couldn't remember if he was classified as a receiver or tight end. So. Yeah, I mean, like Trimble, I do remember on special teams last year.
I'm not sure if Ian does or not. Okay.
You know, so the thing
if he doesn't, he's in real trouble, because you've got to, that's how you make yourself almost invaluable, because if you're a guy that goes out on special teams a bunch and you play well there and you excel, that's a little secret for all you like NFL. Well, they know that, whatever. The players that are like, sometimes a player might make your roster that you're like, what, huh? And it's like probably because he did well on special teams and they need a special teams guy. Everybody needs a guy that they can count on in that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, teams approach tight end all kinds of different ways in the NFL when it comes to the roster. I think that as you see more and more cases like Jordan, you see guys that kind of play that wide receiver tight end hybrid, even more than what we think of with like a Greg Olsen type, right? Or even more than we think of with a like Antonio Gates or Rob Gronkowski. I'm talking about guys that literally were wide receivers.
Yes.
That now move over to a backup tight end role. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting because I don't know what the Jordan Matthews solution is. I think he's played his way onto the team, but I can't tell you that I have any sort of insight.
I wish NFL teams could do like the fantasy league thing where you could just sign a guy as a flex or whatever.
Yeah.
You could just have a guy play flex.
Yeah, I think that would make things easy for everybody.
Yeah. Exactly.
Lauren mentioned it earlier. OG fans, it is live, and every Monday, Lauren Brownlow is offering her Panthers commentary in our newsletter. Still time to sign up to be part of our Founders Club. $200 is going to get you a year-long subscription and 2 exclusive gifts. We also have other deals as well, including for just a mere $7,000. Joe and I will take you to Disneyland in order to secure a lifetime subscription to OG fans. Thank you so much to everybody who has already signed up. The response has been huge, but there's no cap on this thing. So if you have not done it yet and you want more exclusive content from Brownlow, from Joe Giglio, from Tom Edwards, who's covering the Canes for us, Joe Ovius, and myself, go to ogtrianglemedia.com and sign up today. All right, Lauren, we're at this point in the preseason, the dead week between the preseason and the start of the season, where we are, I believe, supposed to be making our picks. But I don't think either you or I want to put our name on any sort of record prediction for this team.
Oh, God, no.
No, I'm right there with you. So what I'm going to do, and if you want to follow me down this rabbit hole, that's fair. I will give you one bold pick and one very safe pick for this team. Prediction, not pick.
Okay.
All right. Here's my very safe prediction. For the first time in 3 years, a coaching staff will make it to the end of the season. They seem very competent. And
Jesus.
I know.
Like,
I know, but I think
this is even people, the head coach and his staff will not get fired.
That's right. That is my safe prediction. My bold prediction actually is the result of what we saw on that scramble/sack play. I think Bryce Young is going to have multiple rushing touchdowns this year. I think that there are some sets in this playbook meant to create time for him to scramble and get into the end zone or get into first down situation, whatever the case may be, in short yardage situations. And we know that's something Frank Reich was not willing to even attempt last season.
Okay, safe. I would say safe would be oh, God. I mean, you said safe. Bryce Young makes a visible improvement that most people will acknowledge and recognize.
Okay.
Like, because you know how the hot take industry works.
No, for
I'm
sure.
not saying it'll be enough for everyone or whatever, but I think people will acknowledge he is much improved by the end of that he is improved by the end of the season.
I noticed this a lot last week. There were a lot of people making that same prediction, and I was just, I don't know if surprised is the right word. It was just notable that almost everyone I saw making this prediction was a woman. And I'm saying this not like as if there's some, no, don't worry, Lauren. This is not like a, oh, well, of course the chicks think Bryce Young, blah, blah, blah. It is just a matter of there are enough women that I know of analyzing football now that it is notable when this person says or offers any kind of opinion.
Oh,
about
let
Bryce
me tell
Young.
you, we don't like to go out on a limb
Yeah.
because let me tell you, not old takes exposed. They don't discriminate with who they come at when you miss a take, but like everybody else will absolutely come at you and be like, oh, you said whatever. So I don't like to do that. And I don't like to be wrong for those reasons. So yeah, I mean, I do. And it felt like it feels like a semi-bold prediction, but it's not really. I think he'll look a lot better this year. And then I guess bold. Would it be bold to say that Jordan Matthews really breaks out? That's what I was thinking.
I don't think so because
I like him.
So I'll tell you this. When he played at Vanderbilt, I thought he had a real NFL future. And for like 2 years he did. And then like the Eagles just kind of gave up on it. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's so much about his talent as they just kept adding receivers during that time and he got pushed down the depth chart. I think it would be A, bold, and B, fair to call it a breakout because here's a dude that gave up on ever being a slot receiver again and was willing to be a number 2 or number 3 tight end just to stick in the league.
And he wasn't, I mean, he's like, we're literally talking about him as if like, does he make the cut? Probably so. Like,
Right.
So, you know, for a guy to go from like barely making the roster or, you know, to that, I think is a big deal. But I've really, you know, that's I was going to say of every other preseason game I've watched too, he's been about the only thing I've enjoyed. I was like, ooh, okay. I like him. He's pretty good.
He's a very naturally talented guy. Like I said, going back to college, I've always thought that he was capable of really big things. I love that he has sort of remade what his value to a football team can be and keeps finding opportunities wherever he can. I mean, I think that is a skill. Yeah, that's a skill that's valuable in any pro sport.
Yes.
All right, Lauren, before we wrap up today, we are going to stray from the Panthers just a little bit because you had some thoughts about the new Netflix documentary about Steve McNair. Is this part of the Untold series?
Yes, I believe so. They were kind of branding it that way, and I was getting all the suggestions afterwards of like the other Untolds.
Yeah, so I will start by saying this. I have not watched this, and the reason is because I do not value the Untold series of documentaries. Really? I think they're mostly
hit or miss for me. You know,
I think they're mostly pretty bad. Like I thought
I like the Manti Te'o one.
Did you think so? I thought I thought that was the most.
I cried. I cry in like all of them.
Well, sure. I thought that was
the Manziel one I enjoyed a lot.
Okay, see, I didn't like the Manziel one because like. At some point, are we going to hear anybody's perspective on Johnny Manziel but Johnny Manziel? Because Johnny Manziel might be owning up to this shit, but boy,
well,
it's
that's
really
what
easy.
I enjoyed. Look, you know me. I like a story about an athlete as a human being.
Sure, I agree with you.
Well, I know.
I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm not here for The Last Dance. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's rewatchable because, like, you don't learn anything in The Last Dance. All you learn is that Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. It's just not my kind of thing.
See, I love stuff like that. So, yeah. I mean, that's where we made different. Like any 30 for 30, I will gobble that up. I love them all. Like I love it. Maybe it's my combination of my love of documentary films specifically and of sports that I just gobble that. Like I can't wait to start Receiver on Netflix. I'm so excited about that. But anyway, I grew up. I probably didn't really get into football until I would say like 90, I was like 13, 14. Okay. And I got into it in part because it was something I could do with my dad because he liked to watch baseball a lot too. But I tried. I can't. Sure. It's very boring to me. Golf as well. Forget it. No. But we, you know, I liked football anyway, but I wasn't like as into it. And I got more and more into it as a teenager because of that, because of watching with my dad. And I watched Steve McNair was the first. I grew up a Dolphins fan because we didn't have the Panthers yet, and my dad's from Florida. Steve McNair was the first quarterback I ever loved. That was not on a team I was rooting for necessarily. Okay. I just loved to watch him play. I thought he was magical, and I loved the way he played. I had never seen, you didn't really see guys play like that. Yeah. He was a trailblazer in that way. I feel like he still doesn't get a lot of the credit he probably deserves in that way. Jeff Fisher, as much as we roast him deservedly, like he maybe doesn't even get enough credit for going that route. And like he always believed in Steve, like always believed in Steve. And I was really sad when I heard like what happened to him, obviously, like getting murdered. I will say, if you don't like true crime, it does get into that for sure. And you don't see anything like graphic, but you do see like pictures from the scene and stuff. And it's not. Yeah. And I've listened to a podcast about that particular case before, and I actually feel like they did a very shallow like examination of it. But so I didn't like that aspect, but they kept interspersing it with like highlights of that. Was it 99 season? 98,
Yeah,
99?
99, the year they went to the Super Bowl.
Year they almost the 1 yard short
Yeah.
of, because I was rooting for them so hard. I cried after that game. I did. I cried. I also hated the Rams back then, so that didn't help. But
were you old enough to remember him at Alcorn State?
No. See, that's the thing. No.
So that is what stands out to me. What year did he get drafted? Was it 95?
96, 5 or 6?
Okay, so whichever one of those years it was, the previous 2 college football seasons, it was really interesting watching the legend grow from you got to see this kid playing at Alcorn, Mississippi, to like then Alcorn State suddenly on TV, not regularly, but there were enough times that ESPN or ABC at one point felt like it was worth putting this guy on. He was a Heisman finalist.
Yes, at Alcorn State. Like, think about that even now.
Yeah, and listen, it is it was easy to recognize watching him play college football that this was something maybe not different, right? Because he still ran the way that running quarterbacks of that time did, which was please hit me, I can run you over.
And yeah, I love that. I love that too.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, he wasn't a runner like transformationally in the way that like Michael Vick was at Virginia Tech.
He was a little more like Cam, which is also probably why it was so easy for me to love Cam.
So what I was going to say is, so I would pull back on Cam just a bit because Cam had the speed, right? Like what was so incredible about watching Steve McNair in college was he could move around and not go anywhere because he was buying himself time to launch that ball down the field. I remember watching a couple of games of his at Alcorn State, and it was clear why people were talking about this kid, like just myth-making sort of stuff. Probably could have played anywhere, but I believe his brother played at Alcorn State, and that's why he ended up following him there.
Yeah, I forget what the story was because the podcast, which is a really good one. I wish I could remember the title of it. I probably should have looked that up before this, but it's fine. It was really, really well done. Like look into everything and into who he was and how he rose to, football fame and all of that, and super interesting. And but for me, the other part that stood out really was that Jeff Fisher made me cry 2 times. I am no fan of Jeff Fisher. Okay, sure. I mean, I don't like hate him, but like, Mr. 8-8, just so boring, whatever. And he made me cry talking about Steve like multiple times. And the footage was so cool to see. Like,
what is so surprising about that to me when you texted me and told me that is, do you remember Jeff Fisher's, I mean, there's no other word for it than like disastrous tryout to move into the booth after he got fired by, was it the Rams that he went to after the Titans?
Something like that. I don't know. It was always like
whether someone told him that, hey, we don't do that, whether someone told him or not, how you don't know that 1-word answers are not enough as a broadcaster flummoxes me.
Well, and you would not know, like if your first exposure to Jeff Fisher were this documentary, you would be like, wow, he's really interesting. He must be a great quote. But that's, to me, I think that's almost more of a reflection on Steve, I'm sure, and what he meant to him. And he cried multiple times. Like he was in tears. And
I mean, I think it's funny outside. So Brady and Belichick obviously will always be linked coach player like that. Boy, I think Fisher and McNair are that Fisher, McNair, Brady, Belichick, like that's such a rarity now.
Yes.
And the fact that McNair and Fisher were linked in that way for so long without having won a Super Bowl is, I think, makes it even more rare.
Well, I think that was probably like one of the first, maybe only Super Bowls I can remember in my lifetime that people were like, it was almost like they did. Even though they don't feel that way, like the players will say that they're like, we still are haunted by like how close it was. And you could just watching Steve like crying on the field afterwards and like his heart ripped out. And you see like Jeff talking to him and they asked him what he told him. And he talks about that in the documentary. And that's when I cried the second time, I think it was. But I'm just like, and the town really like that was I forget, that was like their first or second season, maybe second season. It was early in the Titans' tenure in Nashville.
Oh, yeah. In Nashville. Yeah, that
got them to fall in love with them. I mean, it was just, and it was interesting to watch that as well, like to watch them like fill it up and really fall in love with him. And I just, look, I'm of a certain age. Some of y'all out there might be too. And if you loved Steve like I did, maybe you can fast forward the murder scene stuff and the, and just watch a quarterback that I know I loved to watch very much.
Yeah, I mean, look, with some of these sports documentaries, I do think it is valuable to just remember some dudes when it was somebody that was special to you in that way. I mean, whether or not Steve McNair goes down for future generations as one of the greatest to ever play the position, I think is irrelevant sometimes, right? Like it's a matter of, can person X still spark that little kid feeling in you? I mean, like, I'll always feel that way about Sean Alexander, even though,
Oh yeah,
A,
I
I'm
loved
older.
him too.
Yeah, I mean, even though A, I'm older than you, and B, he came along when I was older than you were when Steve McNair came along.
Yeah.
His senior year at Alabama was my freshman year at Alabama, and had he not gotten hurt, he would have run away with the Heisman Trophy. And it was just, and I think probably would have run away with multiple MVPs had Seattle been a little bit better in those early years when they had
100%. Yes.
but yeah, no, but then eventually became good by the time he was broken down enough to ship off to Washington, I think.
Sounds right.
Yeah. All right, we'll just end it there. We don't do outros on this show.